What's up, everybody? Welcome back into another episode of The Lawyer You Know. And today, this is one of the most highly requested videos I've gotten in a long time. Tons of you sent me an interview done by Lori Vallow. And I didn't really understand what it was until I watched it. And I was like, is this happening right now between trial 1 and trial 2 in Arizona? How is this possible? I know she gave an interview before. I didn't actually see that one. But this one I watched, oh boy, a lot to discuss. So let's just get into it. So the first thing I want to say is we have had a lot to say about Karen Read and the interviews she gave that are now being played in her trial. The risk that it was, whether or not we thought she should have done it, shouldn't have done it, what the reward might be publicly, how she has a lot of public push behind her. Well, everything is different for Lori Vallow. Number one, she basically has nothing to lose. There's not a ton of risk. There is an open appeal. I assume she's going to appeal the Charles Vallow guilty verdict now, and she's about to go on trial for attempting to take the life of Brandon Boudreaux. So while there is technical legal risk, in reality, what we think will actually happen to Lori Vallow, not a ton of risk. And what's the reward? Frankly, if she can change one person's mind in the public, it might be worth that reward to take this risk. Very different than the Karen Read situation. And they discuss, I got to give a lot of credit to this interviewer. She doesn't shy back. It's obvious that Lori Vallow is granting her the opportunity to give this interview. Because if Lori Vallow said no, she never gets this interview. So there is an element of that she does have to be careful with, she being the interviewer, because we want this information. The public is interested in this information, and she's doing a public service getting this information out there. But you can't only ask softball questions. You can't act like Lori Vallow's BFF, which she is going to try to here. You have to ask some tough questions. You may get answers that are very interesting. You may not get answers at all. So let's take a listen to this interview.
Hey, Lori. How are you? Hey. Got it. Make sure everything's kind of squared up. Perfect. You got enough room?
So I talked for a second with Emily D. Baker, actually, about Lori Vallow's hair. She mentioned her curls and her blonde hair. I was like, yeah, that's wild. And she told me all these different ways that, women, I guess, can do this in prison with socks, with pillowcases, with lemon in the hair. And Lori Vallow's got to be doing something, unless that's all el natural. But even in this interview, I mean, she obviously cares about what she looks like.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Perfect. We're good. You guys good?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, it's been an interesting 2.5 weeks.
It's only been that long?
Yeah.
It's been like,
Feels a little longer, I would say.
yeah, it went fast.
It went fast. Guilty. Did you expect that?
No.
Not at all.
I mean, obviously I knew that's a possibility. Yeah. So it was a bit of a surprise, actually.
What made you surprised that it went that direction?
I mean, I shouldn't be surprised knowing what I know about the judicial system and how it works.
So she's going to talk a lot about the judicial system and how unfair it is. And I think there are a lot of people that may agree with her. There are a lot of people probably sitting in prison or in jail that agree with her. And I would agree with certain parts are unfair, and we're working on fixing them. We're always trying to get better. And I actually think having these public discussions and cameras in the courtroom can help to push to fix parts of the judicial system. But when you've been convicted multiple times of crimes like these, the world is always against you. It's always someone else's fault. In Lori Vallow's scenario and in her life, that's kind of how it's always been.
Oh, it still was. Just you were there. So from what happened, I was surprised at that outcome.
And we didn't really see any noticeable reaction from you or really anybody else in the courtroom when that verdict was read. When you did hear it, what was your first thought?
So it's not a secret that I had a near-death experience, right? I talked about it at my sentencing. And when you have that experience and you go to the other side of the veil, you understand, you have a life review. You see your whole life, everything that happened to you. And you see what's important and what's unimportant. And you see what matters in life. So what matters in life is how you react to things, how you treat other people, and the love that you give while you're here on earth. And that's it.
So you felt not
That's it.
reacting was the best call in that moment.
No, I felt like I should have joy in every situation, which is what I was taught to do in heaven. So
That's what she was taught to do in heaven. So we're going to get an understanding here. And this is why it's so dangerous when people bring something to the table and they're like, you could never understand it because I had this experience where I went to heaven. And let me tell you what heaven is like, especially for people that either believe in that, are religious, maybe are learning about religion or about, that part of their life. And somebody like this comes in and can really stick their claws into you, or somebody that's very impressionable, whether they're religious or not, and can be pulled into something like that. We've had clients that have been pulled into certain religious activities that end up making them criminal. And that was the first step. It's wild how that is used to try to control people. And you can tell Lori Vallow, even talking to this interview, whether she believes it or not, that's basically what she bases everything on. Well, it was this experience you wouldn't understand, but that's why I reacted that way. I should have joy in every situation, even being convicted. Not sure where it would ever teach that, but I guess I understand the joy in the trials, and trials making you stronger and building perseverance and letting you know, the world isn't always going to be cupcakes and rainbows, and you've got to get through difficult times. I understand that and the joy in getting stronger, but I'm not sure that's what this was. But she's drawing on that experience that none of us have, that she has, and you can start to understand how certain people maybe came under her spell and were manipulated by her because she says things like this.
So you had a list of witnesses you could call, your parents, your sister, even your brother again, but you chose not to. And I think you resting without calling anybody was a surprise to everybody who had been following the trial. What went into that decision?
So did you read any of the motions that were filed precluding my sister and my mother from speaking about certain subjects?
Some of them, yes.
And then did you read any of the motions that were precluding me from asking certain questions to the law enforcement?
Yes.
So, and did you see all the people that they struck from my witness list?
Yes.
Okay. So
What did that leave you with?
That's what I'm saying. In the judicial system, the way that it works is they really don't let you put on a defense.
So I will agree with her and disagree with her there. In the legal system, sometimes it can be very unfair to a criminal defendant, and it can feel like you can't put on a defense. So I get that. I get that feeling. I felt that way. I've, watched cases on YouTube where I felt that way. But on the other hand, there are rules. And when you break every rule, you're not just going to be allowed to do whatever you want to do. If you don't serve witnesses appropriately, if you decide to represent yourself and don't know how to do things, therefore don't play by the rules, you're not going to get the same defense. And if you want to ask questions that are completely either unreliable or inadmissible, or you took the life of somebody, you want to use their hearsay statements, in the law, we don't allow you to do that. So while certain parts can feel unfair, there can be very legitimate reasons why certain pieces of evidence and certain witnesses are not allowed to testify in your defense. And by representing yourself, the judge warns you, it is definitely going to feel like this because you're not a professional. And guess what? The prosecutor is.
They just don't. They don't let you put on your defense the way that you want to present it. So you think, and this is what I thought too, because you're naive when you go into it, right? Like I didn't know, I was 46 years old the first time I was ever arrested. I didn't know how the system worked. I didn't know any of that. So you think they get to tell their side and you get to tell your side. And you think that's the way that it works. And it doesn't. It doesn't work that way at all. And in a high profile case like this, there's money and jobs and things that are going on way behind the scenes that nobody sees. I mean, what you saw, it's even interesting. So think about this. What you saw, how many different things did you see than what the jury saw? Because you see the arguing of motions. You see all the things that the prosecutor's saying behind the scenes, and they don't get to even see any of that. So
right. And there's a reason for that. And are there certain things that we all disagree with that we think should come in front of the jury and doesn't? And especially in civil cases, it's like these lobbyists and, certain insurance companies make sure that this is on the verdict form or you can't say this in front of the jury or whatever it is. But there are also just years and years of precedent in lawmaking and research that has gone into, like, especially just hearsay, for example. You can understand why I can't say, oh, John said the car was black. Jimmy said the car was black. Alex said the car was black. Johnny said the car, whatever. You can't say that because we should be able to have to go call those witnesses. Not just one person saying there's 25 witnesses to one thing. That's not reliable. I can say the car was black. Johnny might come and say it was gray. but we got to get Johnny's point of view because that's more reliable. So I'm just giving an example of why certain things are found to be unreliable. If Lori Vallow was able to call a witness to say what Tylee said, what Alex said, what they were doing, what they think Adam was doing, what they think Charles was doing behind the scenes, that's speculation, that's hearsay. And to put that in front of a jury as if it's reliable evidence would make the system even worse. It wouldn't make it better. So there are legitimate legal reasons for fundamental fairness and in a fight for justice that shouldn't come into trial. And there's a reason for a lot of that. But I will say, the way she built up her case and the way that she didn't do it appropriately, it does sound like she wasn't able to do anything. She wasn't even able to call witnesses. But wait till the interviewer asks her why she didn't testify, which again, it's a Fifth Amendment right. You don't have to testify. That's your right. But she's acting like the other side is hampering her. They're hiding all this stuff. She's not hiding everything. She just wanted to say the truth.
It's the way that the system works, and it's what it does. And so, yeah, they precluded me basically from having a defense. They precluded you from talking about the things that would be most important to prove your case. So if the judge precludes all those things, what are you supposed to get up and say?
I guess in your case, though, you could have testified.
That's true.
Why not?
So there's a lot of reasons. The way that the system works, if I were to really explain, because now being behind the scenes of the system, I mean, obviously you see things differently, but it's very interesting what the state is allowed to do. So
did anybody hear an answer? By the way, she could have just said it's my Fifth Amendment right not to, and they would have twisted my words or whatever. She could have actually said, some kind of reasonable answer if she wants to, or, because I didn't have any witnesses, I didn't feel like it was worth it for me to testify. But she's all about telling her story, doing it the way she wants to do, saying what she wants to say. But she couldn't get up on the stand and say, cops believed Tylee. This is what Tylee said. This is what I said. This is what Alex said. They believed it was self-defense for years and years and years. And then also, let's not talk about the Idaho stuff, right? Can't do that. You open the door. She realized that, I think. And if she would have got up and told the story the way she wanted to, then the door gets open to the crimes she's been committed of that are heinous and unbelievable, that the jury would have just looked at her probably the way that she deserves, but was not probative and relevant to this case. So that's why.
If you put on any kind of a case, okay, any kind of defense, one person, like one detective, say the detective Moffat that they didn't put on the stand, right? I really wanted to put him on the stand.
You wanted to cross-examine him.
Well, he was the case agent for the first, year and a half or something like that. So he's the one that talked to everybody. He's the one that found out all the information, and they didn't put him on at all. And I think that was because of the exhibits that I was proposing were mainly of him. Right. So they didn't put him on at all because they didn't want me to cross-examine him on the stand. So if I put up anybody, if I put up one person, then they get to put on a whole nother case after that. They get to put on a rebuttal case after that. So they can.
So that's wrong, which I wouldn't expect her to know that because she's not a lawyer. The rebuttal case has to be in response to what the defense is. So if she just put on a case agent that talked about one thing, they can only rebut what he said and what he talked about. Now, if he talks about the entire case, the entire investigation, sure, they can put on another case that responds to what he said. They can't repeat what they've already put on in their initial case in chief. Same thing with her. If she testifies to everything, they can put on witnesses to rebut specifically what she said. But if she was just going to attack that, the bullet didn't match the firearm, well, they couldn't come out and talk about the investigation. They would have to focus on the firearm and the bullet in their rebuttal case. She would know this if she was a lawyer who had tried cases, but she's not. And that's part of what she's missing through all this is it feels even more unfair because she was a pro se defendant. And she's right. It is more unfair to them because they don't get it. They don't know how it works.
And I think this is like the MO of the state. So this is how trial works. Like they put on their case and then you put on your case and then they can go back and put on a whole nother case. Like they kind of save it for the end. And so
very rarely do you save it for the end. On certain cases where it's insanity or maybe self-defense, where there are certain experts the defense is going to put on to prove their affirmative defense, then of course you have a big rebuttal case that you have to save. You're not choosing to save it. It doesn't become relevant until you put your defense on. Very rarely does the state save their best for rebuttal. Frankly, I don't know a single prosecutor that would say that that's what we do. That's the MO as the state.
There's strategy involved. And there's, I think of couples retreat. You know, I'm a big movie buff, so I think of things, and I think I've studied yoga and Tai Chi and the art of war. I mean, that's kind of like, it's crazy what really is going on behind this.
So you didn't want Trina K to get back
So
up.
I'm not sure what she meant by that movie quote, but there is a lot of strategy to it. Maybe she's saying, I don't even know. I guess they were talking about strategy in the movie of a battle. But she mentions movies multiple times, tries to explain her personality, and you can see her kind of nonchalant, joking personality here after she's just been convicted of taking her husband's life.
Up there and present a lot more after if you were to have testified.
I didn't do it for that purpose. I just knew that that is a possibility.
We were talking to the jurors after the verdict, and they had a lot of interesting things to say. One of them,
I would be really interested to hear what they said. I didn't get to hear any of
Well,
that, so
I'll
I've
tell
been sleeping.
so one of them thought not guilty until closing arguments. Do you feel like you did not do enough in closing arguments to have convinced that juror to keep that decision?
I don't think that it was my job really to convince them. I was just trying to present it from my side, you know.
A lot of them had the same questions that we thought. So just to kind of bring you into what affected them the most.
Sure. I'd love to hear that, actually.
So all of them sat there wondering, where is Tylee? She's in the body camera footage.
Right.
Why is she not testifying?
Like I'm a big sports guy, right? She's a big movie buff. I'm a big sports guy. I'm comparing this to like a college athlete, Cooper Flagg, losing in the NCAA tournament. Is it that big of a deal? Not real. I mean, I don't want to, downplay it. It's like, I'm sure it's a big moment in his life. He's a kid. They're like crying. They're so distraught. They're so upset. They're sad. They answer questions at a press conference. She's like giggling and happy and like, oh yeah, I would love to know that. That'd be great. I've just been sleeping. And it's like much, much more severe and serious what's happened to her and the loss that she's taken.
And they felt that there was a part of the story missing, which they didn't know about your previous convictions, but they were correct.
Did they not know?
They did not know. According to them, they did not know. And they shouldn't have known based on
They should
how
have known. And it was weird, right? Because it seemed like Trina K was talking around Tylee without talking directly about her, So I'm sure that was confusing.
Would you have wanted the jurors to?
You were also talking a lot about Tylee, number one. I also, here's one thing, just to give her, give her as much grace as we can. I know you guys think she doesn't deserve it. If I was in her shoes, it's very difficult to try to put yourself in somebody's shoes like Lori Vallow, but if I was in her shoes, I would assume the jury knew. I would assume they're going home and researching it. I would assume that had an effect on them and their quick guilty verdict. I probably would assume that as well.
To know that she's dead?
So I'm sure that was confusing.
Would you have wanted the jurors to know that she's dead?
I was precluded from giving out that information.
Didn't answer the question. Very good question again. She's being respectful and calling them convictions and things like that, as opposed to you did this, which she does get into a little closer to saying that later. But she's like, so did you want to tell him she was dead? Because that wouldn't be good for you. And instead of saying yes, Lori says, I was precluded from doing so. She's really becoming a pro at this.
So that's the way the law works, right? We were both precluded. So that made it very awkward, don't you think?
Let's say you weren't. Would you have preferred the jurors to know that Tylee was dead?
I don't know that. I think they obviously did know.
Well, they said they learned afterward. Though as they were coming out, people were saying, you can now look up the case. So they were Googling things and they're seeing all these prior
So
convictions.
you didn't think that happened during deliberations? Like maybe one person informed all of them that was the case?
Obviously, I won't know.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know. I'm not saying I was there.
But they were upset when they found out that Tylee and JJ are both dead. For you, seeing Tylee on the video, what was that like for you? You were convicted in her death, but we're seeing video of her in that courtroom.
Well, I understand where Tylee is in heaven. I know what she's doing and I know where she is. And so it's been almost 6 years since she passed away. This is the catalyst, right? What happened with her and Charles was the catalyst of her. So I was precluded from talking about that. I was precluded from bringing that up.
But the detectives obviously don't say that she.
The detectives don't. Well, guess what? Neither does the jury. Neither does the jury. But again, I respect the way this interviewer is going at her, because if you just fire at her and yell at her and call her all these like evil names, she's not going to do interviews with you. You're not going to learn anything more. None of us are going to learn anything more about what she's thinking, what she's doing, what actually happened. So I respect the way she's asking him, because she's not cutting corners. She's not agreeing with Lori Vallow. she's pushing respectfully and using language that we all know what she's putting down.
I'm aware of what the detectives say, but they weren't there.
So that's what actually leads me to my next question on this.
Detectives can say whatever they want. The jury, legally, she is responsible for what happened to them.
So I know last time you said that there was a domino effect in our last interview. That was kind of the cause or the result of all of these deaths of people. And when I asked you about it more, you said, I'll save that for next time. So here we are. What do you mean by domino effect? And was the catalyst of that Chad Daybell?
So because I still have my appeals and another trial coming up, right? I don't want to really necessarily get into the details of it, but yeah, it was a domino effect, one that I was not prepared for. Like what happened with Charles that day, between Tylee and Charles that day, had been building for months. They had been getting into these fights, and I had to separate them physically twice. Tylee and I went and stayed in a hotel twice to get away because she was pushing his buttons like only a teenager can, you know? And
so this is her, again, public push to tell her story, to convince the public that it was really tumultuous. It was building for months. Tylee and Charles were not getting along. And the catalyst that day, basically Charles was going to hit Tylee with a bat or shoved her down or whatever he did. Alex stepped in, saved Tylee, ended Charles's life. And that started the spiral where eventually Tylee took her own life. That's Lori Vallow's story. And we learn more every time she speaks, basically. Doesn't add up, doesn't make sense. I don't think that's what happened, but that's Lori Vallow's story. And the way she says it, it's as if she believes it. Now, she's either incredibly manipulative and just a good liar, or she's legitimately delusional. And I don't say that in a joking manner. I mean, she is legitimately delusional. And how she thinks all this works and what happened.
When that happened that day, I mean, that's what I was precluded from discussing. I was precluded from talking about what led up to this incident, why it was so intense.
How are you going to prove any of that? Like, what are you going to say? What legitimate evidence do you have of what you just said? Because if you had legitimate evidence that she did it to herself, don't you think that would have come out in the Idaho trial? And then what happened to JJ? He did that to himself too? Tylee did it to him? What evidence do you have of that? Because her stories are not good ones. And yet she continues to peddle them.
In those few minutes, why things happen like they happened. And so it was hard for me. It's hard for me to not be able to talk about that. It's hard for me to be able to say what actually happened. It's so hard because you think you're going to be able to get up and just tell what happened. And that's not the way the law works. It's not the way it's written. So nobody gets to do that. You know, I'm in here with these women that have these family tragedies too. And they're family tragedies. Things happen. And they're precluded from telling the story. You're precluded from telling that in court. And the jury never gets to see that. So, and you see all the things that the jury doesn't get to see. I mean, they get very limited information. I mean, you saw how.
I don't necessarily disagree with her that there are probably some innocent people in jail and prison. There's also a lot of guilty people, and they're mostly guilty people. And the jury only sees a fraction of what everyone involved in the case sees.
Everything I tried to say, Trina is like, she can't say that. She can't say that. She can't say that, you know? And so, not being a lawyer, you know, and trying this, you know, myself, like I was always surprised, like, okay, well, I guess you can't really tell your side of the story ever. Like, I guess that's not how it works.
And I know with our interview, you referenced a family tragedy, and that was something that we heard in your opening and your closing arguments.
Right, absolutely.
But that phrase bothered a lot of people who know what happened in a totality, right?
Who knows what happened in totality besides me?
Well,
Who was there?
I think everybody who's seen that you've been convicted of now
wrongly
four
convicted.
deaths.
Wrongly convicted, yes.
So if you say that you were wrongly convicted of the death of your children,
Yes.
who killed them?
So you know from my interview with Colby that I told him what really happened. And so that's just what happened.
Can you put that into your own words here?
I could, but I would probably save that for my next trial. So
I want to ask you a little bit.
Save that for my next trial? She's gonna testify in this trial? That was kind of an interesting comment. Is she going to testify in the next trial now and tell her story and say what happened again, similar to how she did with Colby, which didn't make a lot of sense, what she said to him? Also, just once again, Imagine being him. Imagine being Adam Cox. Imagine being Kay. Imagine being anybody involved and having to listen to her do this again. Oof. Now, finding out the truth and knowing more details can be helpful, but some of the things she said, I'm sure, are miserable to hear.
What about the testimony? Obviously, this was your first time. I mean, you're not an attorney. What was that like cross-examining people for you, getting up there and having to be able to put into words your questions properly? You got a lot of objections and kind of had to revamp there on the spot. What was that like for you?
It's harder than it looks.
Sure.
It's harder than it looks. It's stressful in a way. Like your brain has to be going 100 miles an hour. I've been in jail for over 5 years, almost 6 years. So you don't really have to use your brain very much in jail. So it was like math lead or something, you're having to think all the time. So it was interesting. It was different than I thought it was going to be. Difficult.
What was it like facing your brother for the first time in years?
Yeah, that's a good.
Before we get to that, I agree with her. It is crazy. Your brain does feel like it's spinning, going a million miles a minute. That's why there's a lot of training. Every lawyer has a first trial, and it's not as good as your second trial and usually your third trial. And you learn how to do these things. It's perfecting your craft. It's not just like you show up and you can do it and it's easy, which is why you probably don't want to represent yourself in something where your life is literally on the line.
Question. It all happened so fast. I'm still really kind of processing. I mean, yesterday was the first day I slept in like 3 weeks or so. So today I slept into a little bit. And I knew you guys were coming. I was like, I better get up because, I knew you guys were coming. But it was different than I thought.
Did you think that your interactions with Adam were positive between the two of you in the courtroom?
I didn't really think anything at the time. I was trying to be in just lawyer mode and kind of do my job at the time. It's hard because you have being your own attorney, right? You're obviously emotional, and women were obviously more emotional than the men who get up and do it. But I tried to mostly be in attorney mode and try to stick to that.
Well, and that's an interesting point, because I think the difference that we saw with you versus if you had an attorney was sometimes there were personal aspects. For example,
before we get to the personal aspects of what she wants to talk about, because it is an interesting question. When Lori Vallow talks about how she was precluded from putting on a defense, wasn't allowed to do X, Y, and Z, I promise you, watching that trial, a defense attorney would have been able to put on a pretty good defense. They probably would have called Duncan. They would have dug into that faulty investigation. And what the result of that investigation was, even if you couldn't say it, it would be very obvious with certain questions and certain witnesses what it was. If there really were other explanations for Nephi and for the other conversations, if the girls' weekend really was a girls' weekend with 1 5-minute prayer, you could have presented evidence. The girls that were there, LDS experts talk about Nephi, called some law enforcement experts, witnesses to talk about what did and didn't happen in the investigation. You absolutely, even within the rules of evidence, could have put on a defense, and you definitely could have called witnesses if you would have served them appropriately, if you were an actual lawyer.
Example, the green chili chicken enchiladas. That became a huge part of this that I don't think anybody had on their bingo card that was going to be part of this trial. But obviously an attorney would not have started going into that. Why bring that up? And what was that interaction between you and Adam like?
So I don't know. I mean, it was different when it was up there with him because, you've known him your whole life. I was going to come in and say, I'm funny. I'm always doing movie lines. Our whole family is like that. We're big on movie lines. Like Summer and I will text back and forth in total movie lines without any words ever that are our own, just quoting back and forth. And so I wanted to come in and ask Adam, who is Ernest T. Watson? And see what his reaction would be. Because there's no way he couldn't laugh.
No, he seemed.
I think he wouldn't have laughed. If you want my opinion, it's just a guess. I don't know Adam. I don't know Lori. I don't know their, family history. Well, I do know some of it, I guess, because of these trials. I don't think he would have laughed, number one. Number two, if she was funny and cool and a movie buff and quoted lines back and forth, how heartbreaking and sad must it be for her family to see what she has become? Of course, what she's done to everybody else, but even like anybody that's got an estranged family member that at one time your relationship was good, it's brutal. It's got to be brutal. And they just keep having to live this one more trial, and hopefully she goes away and is never heard from again.
Seemed annoyed.
Unless she wants to admit responsibility, tell the truth, and say actually what happened.
On the stand.
Well, yeah. Well, he would laugh because that was the name that he called himself when we used to play school when we were little growing up. That was like his nerdy name for school when we played school. So I thought that would be funny. But I was trying to be I mean, it's obviously a serious situation, but it's hard with my own family to be serious because we're really a joking family. And so,
Would you call you and Adam estranged though now?
not really necessarily.
Okay.
Not really. I mean, I don't know. I don't know Adam. Maybe they're not estranged, but it didn't seem like he was trying to help her out at trial. And maybe we need to talk about the definition of estranged. But she talked about how she knew she needed to be serious. And that was one of the things the jurors said turned them off from Lori Vallow, basically, is that she wasn't taking it seriously enough.
Yeah.
That kind of the personal part of this, I want to touch on a little bit more of that in the testimony. So it seemed from a totality standpoint that some of the testimony that bothered you the most was talking about Charles dating other women, specifically with Nancy Jo Hancock, but you also referenced it in your cross-examination of Detective Duncan. Why did that aspect bother you so much?
I don't think it bothered me that much. I think it surprised me because I wasn't aware of any of that until we got the discovery.
You did not know he was dating other women.
No.
But you were having the affair with Chad Daybell. So how does that?
Gotcha. I like this interviewer. She's like, so you didn't know about that? And she's like, no, can you believe, she didn't say this, but her eyes, Lori Vallow's eyes said, yeah, can you believe he was cheating on me? And she's like, you were having an affair with Chad Daybell. So how does that work that you can really be that mad about it?
You can say affair, but Chad was really just my best friend.
At the time.
Yes.
But then you got married a few months later.
Correct.
So you were just friends, according to you, with Chad before Charles' death.
Correct.
And then only romantic things started after Charles' death.
Correct.
Do you still to this day believe that Charles was a dark spirit, a possessed spirit named Ned?
That's a whole thing that has been way misconstrued.
Can you clear it up?
Probably not in the 5 minutes we have left.
Why not? That would be so helpful. And that could actually help your defense. If you're like, Ned is an acronym to needs to end his drinking because he was actually an alcoholic. And that's what we meant, but we didn't want him to see our text if he ever did, seeing us call him an alcoholic. I'm just making that up. But it's like, if she had some kind of explanation for it, other than what it absolutely seems to be true and continues to line up trial after trial, she acts like, oh, please, that's been so blown out. It's like, you're giggling about this thing being blown out of proportion as if it hasn't put 4 life sentences over your head. Like, what are you talking about? I'm so confused about that. Why not? Why do this interview if you're not going to clear things like that up? Why not take the stand and clear it up? Now, maybe she's like, oh, people are just going to make fun of me and, it's going to make me more of a villain. It's like, okay, what do you have to lose? What if one juror believes you or agrees with you? That's all it takes to not get convicted.
Obviously, I have to ask, right? Because so much centered around the religion part of this, including these Nephi texts. The Nephi texts, I think, became possibly the crux of this trial. And it also was what affected the jurors most. They felt that some of those text messages between you and Alex were some of the most damning evidence in this.
Is that what they're saying now?
That's what they're saying now. So how do you describe the Nephi texts?
So, yeah, they've been totally
interesting. As opposed to, I figured that would be a problem, which every lawyer looking at this case would be like, those texts are a problem. She's like, oh, interesting. That's what they felt like was important. Not that he was dating other women. Oh, not that Alex was injured by something that looked like it could have been a baseball bat. Oh, they weren't interested in that. They were interested in these texts where it sure seemed like we were conspiring to commit a righteous killing and then saying we got rid of Ned afterwards. Interesting that they would care about those texts.
completely misconstrued.
Describe the Nephi texts.
So, yeah, they've been totally and completely misconstrued. So I explained that somewhat in my closing. That's their job. So the prosecution, the state, they're not there, right? They receive all this information and then they make up a story that goes along with whatever information that they have, right?
They certainly shouldn't make up a story. What they should do is point to what the evidence shows and say all the evidence is pointing to this end result. And that's why a lot of prosecutions is like, we don't know exactly what happened and what it looked like and what 4 steps they took or things like that. We only know what the evidence points us to. And here's what it points to. Here's what the science says, the data says, the eyewitnesses say. Here's what the evidence shows. The evidence tells the story and points to it. You don't make up a story. At least you shouldn't, obviously. That shouldn't be what prosecutors are doing.
make it up. It's a made up story. They weren't there. They didn't experience it. So they have no idea. They have to make up a story and then they have to stick to it. And then they put that out to the media and then they put their narrative out and then they stick to their narrative. So you've heard this for 5 years, but it's very misconstrued.
So what is it?
So when you're speaking spiritually to someone else who understands spiritual things, so say Chad, for instance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Chad had a near-death experience. He's had 3, actually. I had a near-death experience. We both went to heaven.
Chad has had 3. So he's 3 times more clear and condescending as I am. Sorry, I shouldn't be like this, but they're using, it frustrates me, like to the core. They are using these religious things like near-death experience that give them some kind of higher power or understanding to manipulate people. Number one. Number two, I wanted to point out when it comes to Nephi, she is going to take a second and explain to us, which I said, okay, at least she gave us an explanation at trial. She's going to probably give the same explanation now, but at least she's trying to explain away Nephi. Ned, when they asked about Ned, she's like, oh, I don't have enough time to explain that to you. It's like, you have enough time for Nephi?
We both had that experience. So what bonded us is it's a very lonely place to have that kind of knowledge and have no one to talk to about it.
It is such a burden to bear to have knowledge and understanding that other people don't have. We are just so far above it that it's difficult to live our life.
In your life that understands that. And so when someone else understands that and you're speaking spiritually, we weren't speaking of anything on earth. We weren't speaking of anything that was happening here. We're speaking of things that are happening in the spirit world. So anybody that's going to read any text of yours, it's going to be way over their head in the sense that they had those experiences. So they have nowhere to put them.
So what does be like Nephi?
So far over their head that some would say it's out of this world, right? It's like, this is the type of stuff. And we have clients that have come to us and said stuff like this before. And it very well maybe, I mean, I don't know if it's true. Maybe some of the stuff my clients have told me is true, we'll say, in this vein. But it's very difficult in the legal world to prove things like this.
Those experiences. So they have nowhere to
and I'm someone who believes in miracles and I believe that, you know, there is a world that, you know, we don't see. I believe that exists, right? I know everybody does not, and that's totally fine. And people can think you're crazy if you do, and I get it. But that's not what this is, right? If you pick a jury, and I'll just tell you from picking a lot of juries, most of them have some kind of spiritual or religious understanding or family background or their own faith of their own. You know, most of them have something like that, to where when they see be like Nephi, who had this righteous killing, and I want you to do this, and we got rid of the spirit Ned with 2 bullets in his chest to get his money, they're like, that doesn't quite jive with what I think is mainstream, at least, or is understandable or recognizable, right? So it's not like you have to not believe that, you know, there's no such thing as a miracle or no such thing as a God or no such thing as a spirit world or an angel, or, you know, it doesn't mean you have to not believe any of that to think that this doesn't add up, right? And that's sometimes what she's making it seem like is, oh, hey, we're all in this together. If you believe X or you believe Y, it's like, no, we're not. And that's why so many people in the LDS faith have come out and been like, that's not us. Not same smart tech. There's a movie line for you, Lori. We do not rep the same smart tech. And I think it's really important to point that out, that this is not representative of religion generally or LDS faith generally, because a lot of people experience, whether they're in it still or used to be in it, out of it, have renounced it completely, they still pretty much all say this is not normal.
Them.
So what does be like Nephi mean?
Be courageous, be brave, have perseverance.
And why did you have to be brave in that situation? What were you referencing then to be brave about?
So Adam and Charles and Brandon were plotting against me. My sister was worried about it. My mom was telling me about it. I didn't really realize it. I was in the middle of taking care of kids with special needs, a daughter with chronic illness, and a son with special needs. So if you know anything about kids with autism, it's 24 hours a day. And I was busy mom. They were like, oh, this is weird. Adam came into town and he's with Charles and you haven't talked to him. And we need to let you know there's something going on. Maybe you could come stay at my house. My sister had that whole thing of things, come stay at my house. I can't pick up JJ and go stay at someone else's house. It ruins his routine.
So you were referring to the intervention.
What they call an intervention. Now I don't believe that's what it was at all.
What did you believe?
I think they have other plans completely.
So
Like what? Like they were going to get you first? Come on.
when Charles died, why did you guys wait 47 minutes to call 911? That became a huge
I
part of
didn't
this
wait
trial.
any time. I didn't wait any time.
Well, I guess you didn't call at all.
Because
Alex called.
So now she throws Alex under the bus a little bit. Why did it take so long to call 911?
that's right. It was his responsibility in my mind that he took over and was handling that situation. I was getting the kids out of danger.
Do you think he should have called sooner?
Absolutely.
You do?
Yeah. I think he probably freaked out. Charles and Alex were friends for years. Alex lived with us for 6 months in 2018. And he and Charles would hang out all weekend and they'd go do stuff together. And Charles loved Alex and Alex loved Charles. This just happened this day, the way that it happened. And it was a tragedy. Alex.
If that's true, even more sad. Your brother's friends with this guy, probably loves this guy. I love my brother-in-laws. It's and you're telling him he's got to do this like Nephi for the spiritual warfare to get rid of Ned? It's just think about the levels of manipulation and what all these people went through around her.
Was probably freaked out as I was of the whole situation. So I don't know why he did what he did. And, he's not here for me to ask him anymore.
Do you regret representing yourself in this trial?
No.
Why?
It's for the same reasons I told you before about getting a speedy trial.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing that for all the women in here that have been sitting here for so many years, and I told you, I wouldn't expect attorneys to be able to do that. They want more time, so, I'll continue to go through the motions and, we have another trial coming up in a couple of weeks. I have lots to do for that trial and preparing and getting ready. And maybe some of those things will be cleared up in this trial. They filed a motion that they're going to bring in everything now.
Yeah, I saw that.
And so if the judge allows that, which
who knows?
What do you think?
I don't know what they mean by bringing everything, but if they mean all the prior crimes to show this is her MO and her prior convictions, she's obviously cooked and she's going to get convicted. But will she start to give reasons or explanations? Will there be some truth to it? Will it be more delusions? I don't know.
He's gonna do.
Well, yeah, I mean, we don't know.
You tell me what you think he's gonna do, Brianna.
Well,
you think he's gonna say nope, no 404B? We're not gonna let any of that stuff in. I mean,
the judge was relatively patient with you, I thought, throughout the trial.
Did you
feel that? Well,
No,
I
did
think he
not
was
feel
helping
like
you.
that.
One more. Given that you were just found guilty, and I know you don't like the jail conditions, would you change your plea in Brandon's trial?
No.
Why?
Will I change it? No. Because I didn't do anything. So no, there comes a point when you just have to stand up, regardless of what they do to you, right? This will have zero effect on me in eternity. Zero effect on me in eternity. And I already know that. So I'm here to help whatever women I can help in here be courageous and stand up for themselves, because it's a system that bogs you down. These women are bogged down. They've been here for years. They've been treated horrible in this situation, and they've been treated horrible by.
So that's absolutely true for some people in there. Absolutely true. And maybe somehow she will be used for good after all the evil that she's done. And I hope that's what I'm going to hope is going to happen. That's what I hope. I hope for rehabilitation in prison. I don't think she deserves to ever get out, no matter how rehabilitated she ever gets. But I do hope she's able to do some good in there. And I will continue to hope that. I know people might get upset with me because of that, but that's how I look at things in life, and even people like Lori Vallow. I'm not a big fan of hers. I think she's incredibly evil, but I don't think anybody is past redemption. And I hope that she is turned around and is able to do some good. And maybe it's help women in the prison system somehow.
Their own attorneys, they've been treated okay, they've been here for 8, 9, 10 years waiting to go to trial, when the conditions at the prison, even if they got convicted, are a million times better than they are right here. So I'm helping them to stand up and be courageous. If you didn't do it, you just get up and say you didn't do it. If they convict you because that's the way the law works, then they're going to convict you because that's the way the law works. It is designed to convict you. It is not designed to acquit you. And I want you to look this up, and I want you to tell me next time we talk, how many people in Maricopa County in a murder case get acquitted. I want to know the percentage get acquitted, because I bet you it's less than 1%.
It's not often that we see it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Kudos again to that interviewer. I thought she did a really good job of asking tough questions, not giving in or acting like Lori Vallow hadn't done anything wrong, but being respectful enough to where Lori Vallow would at least speak to her. So I do really appreciate that. There was one other thing I was going to say. Oh, she's obviously right about the conviction percentage too, which is why when we talk about these cases, we have to protect the rights of the criminal defendant. Would it have changed the case for Lori Vallow? Probably not. But could it change the case for others who are railroaded and don't get a fair case and a fair trial and don't choose to represent themselves and waive all sorts of rights that they have? Maybe something good will come out of this, right? I'm always looking for something good. I'm always looking for something good to come out of something bad. So I hope it is. Let me know what you guys thought as you watched that. I mean, I had so many thoughts rushing through my head. I know you guys did too, because a lot of you sent this to me, which I appreciate. And as more stuff like this comes out, let me know. Make sure you guys hit the like button. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on our videos on the Brandon Boudreaux trial, I guess we'll call it. Lori Vallow has affected so many people's lives negatively. It's hard to keep track of all the trials she has because of them. But that's all we got. Till next time, hope everybody has an awesome weekend. I'm out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.